Okay, so it is not grammatically right. It is not theologically right. Today we are looking at next theory. And what is the next theory? Pre-creation chaos theory. Pre-creation chaos. All right. What is this theory says? They believe, this is mainly propagated by Merrill Unger, who has written a lot of books, and so what does this theory says? This theory actually tells, yes, there is no gap between Genesis 1, between Genesis 1 verse 1 to 2. There is no gap. Yes, no gap. They believe that there's no gap. But what they say, what you see in Genesis 1 verse 1, right? What is the verse? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Remember that verse? That verse is actually not talking about in the beginning. I mean, first when the time began, when God created. No, it is simply, verse 1 is a summary statement. Summary statement. Summary statement of what? Summary statement of all other verses. For example, Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 to chapter 2 verse 3 is the summary of it. It is the explanation of creation. So that means verse 1 is a summary. Verse 1 is a summary. Okay? So they say there is no gap. Okay, these are Hebrew scholars, Hebrew grammarians said no gap between verse 1 and 2. But what do they say? Their problem is Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, that in the beginning God created, right? God created. So that creation was not out of, you use the word, not ex nihilo. What is ex nihilo? Out of nothing. Okay, now think about how God created the universe. Was there a pre-existing materials? There was no pre-existing materials. So that means God created the heavens and the earth out of nothing. Right? Out of nothing. But this group says, no, it was not out of nothing. That means there was, even before Genesis 1 verse 1, there was another world, or there was already earth, and there was a creation. There was human beings. There was not only human beings, there were animals, and God judged, right? God judged the earth. And now, what you see, Genesis chapter verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That verse, they say, it is actually God was restoring the old earth into a new earth, right? So that is what this theory actually talks about, right? So I'm not going to I will not go into the deep nitty-gritty of all the explanation, grammatical explanations that are given in the notes. If you want to really look in detail, go through the notes, because I have given everything necessary for you. If you are so curious to understand, those things are given there. Please go through. But this theory says, this is known as pre-creation chaos theory. What is that? Pre-creation. There was a chaos before creation, right? There was an earth before, in the beginning, before Genesis 1 verse 1, there was already an earth and heaven. And what God did, God refashioned it, right? So that means they also believe that the earth is so old, and therefore they can accommodate themselves with the other scientists. Okay, so this is what the pre-creation chaos theory. Now, what are the things? What are their argument? Let me bring it here. They have got actually a few arguments. Number one, as I said, Genesis 1 verse 1 is a summary statement for them. They are not saying they are not saying it is continuous, like it was a first. It is simply a summary statement. Second, they say the verb create, bara, right? Bara is a Hebrew word, to create. In Genesis 1 verse 1, cannot refer to creation out of nothing. This is what they say. All right. And third, an outgrowth of the same second argument is that Genesis 2 is not a description of God's direct creative activity, but it reflects state of judgment. And then another, I don't think it has got any weight there. Israel's view of creation is distinct from other ancient Eastern religion. All right. So they have come up with the four arguments. All right. Now the problem is going through this argument will be a difficult effort, because all of you, not most of you, all of you do not know Hebrew language, and therefore the arguments is little different, but it's difficult. But I have let me point out few things that you can understand. All right. So what is their argument is that Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is a summary statement. And they say, not only in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, but there are other places this kind of summary statements are there. Now, open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 1. Okay, let's 1 second. Let me open my Bible also here. So what I will do, I will bring the Bibles to this screen. Okay. Okay, now here, take into Genesis. You're able to see the screen, right? Okay. Now, look at, if you read Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, this is what you read. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Okay. So what they are saying, this verse, Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, is a summary statement, all right, of all what is written here. Like all of these verses has got one, first begins with a summary. Now let's look at, they argue because Genesis chapter 2 verse 4 is also a summary statement, and then there are explanations. Okay, look at Genesis chapter 2 verse 4. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and heaven. You see, right? Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis chapter 2 verse 4 says, this is the account of heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and heaven. So by looking at this verse, now let me show you the notes. Okay, they would say that yes, this is a summary statement. Now, and the argument goes little more further. They would say, based upon the apparent parallel structure of Genesis 2 verse 4, as well as similar structures in Genesis connected to Mosaic use of introductory Toledot formula. All right, what is Toledot formula? I don't know whether you have studied Genesis, right? Maybe you might have read Genesis. How do you divide Genesis? Ask the question, how do you divide Genesis, right? If you wanted to divide Genesis, there is a formula known as Toledot, or the word generations, right? Word generations. There are different places in Genesis, you will see the word generations, right? Wherever you see the word generations, right, that begins a new section in Genesis. Okay, there are 10 divisions for Genesis here, right? For example, chapter 2 verse 4, 5 verse 1, 6 verse 9, 10 verse 1, 11 verse 10, 27, 25 verse 12, and 19, 36 verse 1, 37 verse 2. We will see these are the generations of Noah. These are the generations of Jacob. These are the generations of Joseph. You know, so you will see the word generation. Okay, so whenever you see the word generation, that is a place you need to divide Genesis, right? The word generation will show you a new section in Genesis, right? A new division of the book. So you have got about 50 chapters in Genesis. And these 50 chapters can be divided into 10, right? 10 sections. And in the beginning of each section, there will be a word in King James, generations, or in NASB, they would say account, right? Account. In Hebrew, the word Toledot is used. Toledot is used, all right? So the first occurrence of the word Toledot is, you will see in chapter 2 verse 4, chapter 2 verse 4 to 7 when you read. Now, pre-creation chaos theories, you know, those people who propagate that theory says, see, you see there are 10 places you see the word generation, that is a summary statement, and then following verses explains the summary statement. Okay, and it begins with the chapter 2 verse 4, right? So that is there. Now what they say, therefore Genesis 1 verse 1 also is a summary statement, doesn't explicitly say this was the original condition of the earth. Okay, doesn't say, but simply a summary statement. That's what their argument. Now I have given, you know, with a lot of, you know, effort, there is an argument is made. I say Genesis 1 verse 1 is not a summary statement. It's not a summary statement. It simply states, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and it continues. It is the beginning of the creation, not a summary statement. Why I say it is not summary statement? It is simply this. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, you don't see the word Tolidod. You don't see. You don't see the word generations in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Yes, chapter 2, verse 4, it is a summary statement and it explains. 5 verse 1, yes, it is a summary statement and you see the explanation. Right, you see, yes, there are summary statements throughout Genesis, about 10 places. But I am saying Genesis 1 verse 1 is not a summary statement. So maybe some of you have joined now. Let me tell again, what is the theory about? This theory basically propagated by Hebrew scholars, right? Hebrew grammarians. They said, yes, there is no gap between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. There is no gap. They agree there is no gap. But what do they now propose is this. Genesis 1 verse 1 is not the real beginning of the universe, right? Because they say the word create not necessarily to create something out of nothing. Rather, it is actually can mean reshape or restore. So they say, before Genesis 1 verse 1, there was earth and heavens full of animals, human beings, and all kinds of things. And God judged that world. God judged that world. And Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is the summary, it is the summary statement of rest of the creation where God refashions, God restores, right? So that is the this theory says. So they are saying, why they are saying Genesis 1 verse 1 is a summary statement, because they are taking an example from other places, chapter 2 verse 4 and other verses, which we actually use to divide the book of Genesis into 10 sections, right? 10 sections that talks about the account of or generations of people, right? Genesis is simply the book of the beginnings. Genesis, book of the beginnings. That means it talks about beginnings of generations, important people, and then their generation. That's how Genesis has to be divided. Yes, so those arguments are right, but we are saying Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is not a summary statement. Why? Because the formula that is used to divide other parts of Genesis or other parts of the books of this book is not used in verse 1. All right, that is our argument. And rest of the things, where you go ahead and maybe when you are so free, right, no one is there, and you concentrate and just read, you will have some idea. But it requires some grammatical knowledge in Hebrew. That's a problem, right? And therefore, what I will do, I'm not going to explain, because you won't understand everything. For example, what is a call system? Okay, what is a Nephal system? Right, these are all some of the grammar in Hebrew, right? You may not be able to understand all of them. So I'm trying to just leave. But if you are curious, please go through the notes, right? That will definitely help you in your understanding, in your study. All right. So and so I explained, they use the word create, the use of create to undermine creation out of nothing. This is the argument. They say it doesn't have to be, or actually they say, actually it is not. The word create is not a reference to creation out of nothing. All right. Now, I have made an argument here, says that this word, actually the verb to create, used several times in the Old Testament, right? Several times in the Old, more than 50 times, the word create is used in the Old Testament. All right. Now, but they just leave out the grammar. But out of about more than 30 times, when the word create is used, usually God is the subject. God is the subject, and we never said, we never argued that the word create always means out of nothing. We did not say, but we said the word create and asa means to make. Those are synonyms. That's what we have said in our previous argument. If you wanted to know our argument, go back to the previous parts of the notes where you will get. And what we are saying, see, here is the word. Okay, it is used 48 times, and in the 48 times, 38 times this is used in call stem. Okay, but the interesting argument is that God is, however, God is not, okay. Of the significance for a study of the biblical creationism, God is the subject in all 38 uses of this word in the call stem in a Hebrew grammar. 38 times, God is the subject, right? And so, if God is a subject, then the word bara is an appropriate word to use in the context describing creation out of nothing. All right, that is our argument, and I have given there. And second arguments are, maybe it's a little difficult to follow, so I'm not going to explain now. Right now, let's okay. Let's look at the second argument that they have made. The word Bereshit. You know what is Bereshit? Don't worry. It's a Hebrew word again. It means in the beginning, right? Rashid means beginning. Bereshit means in the beginning. All right. So qualifying bara in Genesis 1 verse 1 supports our contention that bara is a reference to creation ex nihilo. Now, why we say that there was no other word before Genesis 1 verse 1 is this word, right? In the beginning. Right? If Bible say in the beginning, right, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that? And I simply see it as a meaning, and it means that it was the beginning of time. It was the beginning of creation. So when someone would argue and say, before Genesis 1 verse 1, before that, there was a universe, and there was heaven and earth, and there were animals, and there were human beings, and Satan fell from heaven before Genesis 1 verse 1 and tempted all the people who are in that old earth and sinned against God, and God judged them. God judged them and destroyed them by a flood. And now again, Genesis, then here is Moses begins the work of God in restoring and reshaping. Now that is what they argue. I'm saying if the word in the beginning is used, I am saying that means there was no earth and heaven before in the beginning. Before in the beginning. And I would say this is the strongest clue in Genesis. The word in the Bereshit is the strongest argument that we can make. There is no earth and heaven before in the beginning, right? There's no earth and heaven. So, when maybe as you listen to me, why are you teaching us all these things, right? Because we have never heard. Yes, you may not have heard all these things. But what I'm saying is these theories are taught in various seminaries, not only in here, but in the US, right? US is the place where big institutions, theological studies are there, and they teach them. And sometimes what happens, some of your friends, or maybe you might have gone to a Bible college here, and perhaps they might have taught you the same story, right? Because whatever they teach you, they will come, in whatever being taught in the US, sometimes, people teach here without really looking into the why and what. They have their own way of, they just follow what others do. And especially because we have science, people believe that science is so big in that it is bigger than and greater than God's word. And therefore, because if you don't accommodate your mind with the science, you are somewhat unlearned, right? So let's do something. Let's come up with the theories where we can go in the same page with the modern scientific community. So they come up with the theories. And so what I do, my point is, no, you don't, there is no point in following all this scientific community when they talk about the origin of the world or the age of the earth. You don't have to, because they are wrong. Actually, they can never prove. It's not provable. They can simply state. Okay, so that is my point here. And the next is the same story that we discussed for the gap theory. Genesis chapter 2 is actually is a negative description of judgment. We looked at the word darkness. It refers to talks about judgment. That's what they say. And I'm not going to spend time here because we already saw in gap theory the same argument. So please go through these materials so that you will have maybe a little more clarification on how to take this one. All right. And the Israel distinctive view of creation has now, I don't think it has anything, right? The fourth supporting argument of the creation chaos theory affirms that Israel's view of origin is distinct from other ancient Near Eastern creation myths, right? While this argument may provide some support, but it actually has, what is the point? Whether Israel, what is the point that they try to make? Yes, other religions in the ancient Near Eastern has also creation account, and their account is different from Israel's, right? So let's look at okay, if Israel theology of origin is not synthesized, this hypothesis will either reduce Israel's cosmogony as best to a modicum of preserved revelation dealing with the subject of origin, or worse, surrender any claim to an unadulterated cosmogony. See, my point is, if Bible is different from other religion about the origin, what's the problem? Why do you want to bring a theory to harmonize with biblical theory of the origin? And why do you want to bring? What is the point? I'm saying we should be happy to say that we are different, and if Israel has a different times of understanding about from other religion, that's the way God revealed, and that is what actually happened, right? So I don't think there is any much point in talking about other religions and any way to harmonize Bible with other religion. I don't think there is any point. All right, so I'm not spending much time on that one. All right, so I have spent a considerable amount of time with some of the arguments about Near Eastern creation myths, and they would say there is only one, right? I say here, Enuma Elish, there is only one pagan religion, and their book clearly maybe reflects some kind of similarity between, with the Genesis one. All right, so that is what about the pre-creation chaos theory. So far what we have discussed, I wanted to say, we talked about figurative interpretation. Figurative interpretation, where they say, for example, in the figurative, we saw theistic evolution, right? Theistic evolution. We looked at, and after then there was day-age theory, right? Framework hypothesis, that kind of theories we looked at. Then we looked at, in the second chapter, we looked at two theories now. One is gap theory, which is very predominant. Second is pre-creation, creation, chaos. Pre-creation, chaos theory, right? So gap theory says there is a gap between Genesis 1, verse 1 and 2. There is a gap. All right. This gap is not 1 day or 2 days, millions of years of gap, right? And so that is what that theory says. And so we refuted that theory. Basically, this is wrong. There is no need to, and it is actually wrong to find a gap. What is pre-creation theory says? Okay, there's grammatically there is no gap here. All right, this theory is promoted by some of the Hebrew scholars. Grammatically, there is no gap. But still, the earth is so old. How the earth is so old? So for them, in the Genesis 1 verse 1 is a summary statement of the rest of the verses. Right? One verse summary. Okay, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, rest of the verse explains how God created the heavens and the earth. Right? So that's how they say. And the argument is this. So in Genesis 1 verse 1, actually, you're not seeing a creation out of nothing. This is not creation out of nothing. No, that is not this one. Genesis 1, actually they say, so they were taking the word bara to say, or to create means restore or refashion. That is the argument, refashion. Restore or refashion. So they say, before Genesis 1 verse 1, there was an earth. There was a world, right? So, if people talk about, in gap theory, they say, okay, Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and 2, there is a gap. And there was a world where God judged that world. Pre-creation chaos theories would say, it is not Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and 2, not in between there, but even before even when Moses said, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, before even that, there was a world. And that world had people, animals, water, everything. And when Satan sinned against God, Satan actually fell in that world and tempted all the people. And they all followed Satan, right? They all followed Satan. And what happened? God judged them. This is what they say. And interestingly, there is one more thing. Some of them argue. So what happened to all those people who are dead? What happened to the dead people? In the pre-Genesis 1 verse 1, all the people who died and they became demons. So the demons that you see are the souls of people who are dead before Genesis 1 verse 1. When we study about angelology, we are going to study about this one. And my point is, this is actually, no, this is not right because Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 uses the word in the beginning, right? In the beginning. So when you use the word in the beginning, it means there is no time before in the beginning, because in the beginning is the beginning of time, right? In the beginning point of time. And so when the word Bereshit is used, that says Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is the original beginning, not the beginning of restoration, but beginning of it is the original beginning. That's my contention. So that's what I explained in pre-creation chaos theory. Okay. All right. So what I would like you to do is that please go through the notes, maybe in each chapter at least a couple of times. Just concentrate and read, right? Read. Some of them are going to be technical. It is technical simply because the grammar, right? Hebrew grammar. I know that you have not learned the Hebrew and it's going to be difficult to follow, but some of the things I have explained which you can understand, and some of the things that you are not able to understand, I have not explained. I have left it there. All right, so that we can now begin our part 6, young earth creationism. Right, I am an young earth creationist. All right, young earth creationist. So you will see how this argument developed, being developed here. That means I believe that earth is not millions of years old. I believe the earth is a few thousand years old. That's what I believe. Few thousand. And you don't ask, okay, so that means how many do you believe, or do you think that the earth is about like 6,000 years old? Is that I'm talking about? May not be. Okay, may not be really. I will explain why, what is the problem in calculating the time of the earth, in the preceding chapters. So you will have some idea about that. All right, so let's begin this one, and maybe we'll just look at the introduction. Since the days of early written extra-biblical material. What is extra-biblical? Those materials that are not part of the Bible. Since the beginning, the earliest written biblical materials, people have asked questions such as, whom started, created order, and how? Okay, who started the created order and how it all began, right? In every religious account, you would see answer to this question. These questions are reflected in the ancient creation mythologies from China, Japan, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. In all of their mythologies, you would see some kind of explanation about the beginning. So the questions about origins are of such great import in important biblical revelation that the first few verses of Genesis begin actually with them. Probably only the Bible begins with this profound statement, right? Profound statement That simply that one verse is so deep and so big, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All Christians recognize the early verses of Genesis affirm that God is the creator, right? There is no doubt at all. Every Christian believe that God is the creator. In contrast to other ancient Near Eastern, right? Sometimes we say A, N, E. Anytime you see the word A and E, please understand that is a short form for ancient Near Eastern, right? What is ancient Near Eastern? It is the ancient Near Eastern countries, means those countries that are near to Israel, right? And okay, so to other ancient Near Eastern creation myths, Genesis affirms that the transcendental, eternal God. Now, why I say transcendental? Now, when we learned theology, when we learned systematic theology, when we learned about holiness, right? We remember we talked about a transcendent God. If you recall, I say God is holy in two ways. So I said, what is the basic idea of holiness? The basic idea, the Hebrew word suggests to separate. To separate, that is the basic idea of holiness. So when Bible said God is holy, means God is separate. Right? That is what Bible means when Bible uses the word. God is separate in two ways. What are the ways that God is separate? Number one, God is separate from his creation. God is separate from his creation. That means God is not part of the creation. God is separate, right? For that we say God is God is apart from the creation. For that we use the word God is transcendent, right? God is separate from his creation. Second usage of holiness is that God is separate from all that is evil, right? So that talks about the morality. But the first use of holiness, it has to do with God's apartness from his creation. God's apartness from his creation, right? So what does that mean here? Now look at Genesis affirms that transcendental eternal God, eternal God who is so far removed from his creation, right? Created the heavens and the earth. God is not part of the heavens. God is not part of the earth, right? Heavens are created by God. Earth is created by God. And God created out of nothing. Created everything out of nothing. That means there was a time when there was no material at all. Right? No materials. There was emptiness. Right? Out of nothing, God created. However, as we have seen past few lectures, not all the Christians agree on how to interpret Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to 2. So we have attempted to demonstrate that the old earth models represented by various figurative interpretations of the creation week and recreationist explanations are biblically inadequate, right? Biblically inadequate. With this lesson, we want to set forth what really Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2 affirms. Right? So we looked at what others say. We explained their errors and their understanding, why they are wrong, explained it, right? So today, from this class, what we'll begin to see what does this Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2 really teach. So let's look at young earth creationism. We use the short form YEC, right? YEC. YEC means young earth creationism. Is a traditional explanation of Jews and Christians alike. We initially described this view and its supporting information. All right, description of this one, YEC, right? Verse 1, right? Verse 1 is an independent statement declaring that God created the original mass called earth out of nothing, right? It is a mass, it is materials out of nothing. Since Moses used word conjunctive to introduce verse 2, he was explaining, right? He was explaining what the earth was like at the time of its creation in 1 verse 1. Okay? So 1 verse 1 is a reference to tell how the earth was, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Consequently, verse 2 is answering the question. What is the answering the question? What was earth like at the time of its creation in verse 1? How did the earth look like when God created in the beginning? All right, the answer of verse 2 is that it was in an abiotic form. What is abiotic? Bio, there is no life, right? It was without form and empty. There was no form and it was empty. It was covered by water and the Spirit of God was protectively watching over it. Remember, you read Genesis 1 verse 2, Spirit was hovered over the water, right? The idea is protectively watching over it, right? It was not imperfect. It was perfect. It was perfect, but it was incomplete. That is the difference. The earth was incomplete. The earth was not in a world where human beings who are the image bearers of God are able to live on this earth. It was incomplete. That's what it says, right? So it was the first step of the 6-step or day project, right? There are 6-day project, right? God took 6 days to make everything, right? Or 6 steps to make everything. And so verse 2 is the first step. When God created the heavens and the earth, he chose to complete this process in 6 literal days. Okay, that is what our point. This is what our main idea here. When we say young earth creationism, this is what simply means. Okay, now let's look at support for young earth. Some basic support for this view is found by taking Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and 2 at face value. The word created. What is the Hebrew word? Again, bara. Bara means to create. Is used to describe God's initial creative activity in bringing into existence the heavens and the earth. All right? without the use of any pre-existing material. There was no material ever existed before that. God was there. God is eternal, but there was no material. So out of nothing, right? There was nothing existed except God. God created the earth. Bara, create, does not inherently mean to create out of nothing. Yes, does not inherently mean to create out of nothing. It is the most appropriate Hebrew word to describe creatio ex nihilo, or creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. Our argument has been that the semantic range for bara may include, in an appropriately qualified context, the concept of creation out of nothing. So we are saying bara is the only best option to communicate the idea of creation out of nothing. There is no other word can be qualified like this, right? So I say here, this argument was based on 4 semantic items. God is the subject of bara in Genesis 1, and he also exclusively subject of bara in other 37 places, right? No material used to create the products. No material is used. And you can look at all those references. It is talking about creation out of nothing. All right. The direct objects of bara were always specially created objects. And bara is qualified in Genesis 1 verse 1 by a prepositional phrase, in the beginning. So remember, we argued this one already. We made that argument. If the verb bara is used to create, and if that word is used with the bereshith, that is in the beginning, then absolutely this is the most logical understanding, that creation is out of nothing, right? Ex nihilo. So Genesis 1 verse 1 says creation out of nothing.